Hello, everyone. Welcome to the seminar. Today's speaker is Dr. Dong Lin. He's Advanced Studies Program postdoc working at the High Altitude Observatory, National Center for Atmospheric Research. His current research interest is magnetosphere, ionosphere, thermosphere coupling, focusing on the precipitation from magnetosphere into the upper atmosphere and characterizing and understand the effects of those precipitations, both electrons and ion precipitations. He obtained his PhD degree last year, 2019, from Virginia Tech, supervised by Professor Wayne Scales. Actually, he spent 1 year at UNH from 2014 to 2015. So for today's talk, please type your questions and comments into the chat window, and we will go through it after the talk. And also, you can unmute yourself or ask questions if you during after the talk. With that, Dong, you can take over and begin your talk.
Okay, thank you, Wenbin. Can everyone see my screen well and hear me well?
Yep, we can hear you and see your slides.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Yeah, my name is Dong Lin. I'm an ASP postdoc from NCAE. So today I'm going to share some of the progress on the ionosphere thermosphere dynamic study, and particularly making use of the newly developed multiscale atmosphere geospace environment model, also known as a MAGE model. So the MAGE model development as well as this talk are both part of the activities in the Center for Geospace Storms, or CGS. So CGS is basically one of the 9 NASA Drive Science Centers in Phase 1. I would like to acknowledge my collaborators, including my advisor, Wenbin, and the CGS PI, Slava Merkin, and also everybody on the CGS modeling team. So it's okay. Let me get the point. Okay, so yeah, I really like to introduce this animal friends. Like Wenbin just mentioned, I spent 1 year at the UNH. So I used to be a UNH wildcat from 2014 to 2015 before I became a hockey at the Virginia Tech in 2015, where I got my PhD degree. So the picture in the center is the Mesa lab of NCA. Although my office is not in that building, and I didn't find an animal figure for NCA. But I just want to mention that before I came to NCA, I started the collaborations with folks from HAO as well as the Johns Hopkins University applied physics laboratory on this Gamera model, which is a global MHD model for the magnetosphere. And then later on also got working on the chimp model. So this model's got this animal figure, although they look very ferocious, but they are indeed very powerful when you explore the geospace. And also, I'm very glad that all these, including the gorilla, the monster, and the wildcat and the hawkies, are now all important parts of CGS. So this is the outline of my talk today. I just want to start it with a brief background introduction for the ionosphere thermosphere, and then I will also give a introduction of the MAGE model, and then I will move on to a few well-known dynamic processes in the ionosphere thermosphere during storm time. Excuse me. Particularly, I will be talking about the subaurora polarization streams, Saps, and forward-moving auroral forms, or Pmaps, and time of ionization, or TOI, and polar cap patches, and also the traveling atmosphere and ionospheric disturbances, TAD or TID. Then I will end with a conclusion and a summary. So let's begin with this introduction. So for the ionosphere thermosphere background, I just want to answer these 4 questions. So where is the IT when we talk about it, and what are there in the ionosphere thermosphere, and also like what is going on in the ionosphere thermosphere, and finally, after all, why do we care about all those? So where is the IT? Well, so if we look at this from bottom to top, well, as I think people here all agree that the Earth is a sphere. So we divided the environment surrounding the Earth into different spheres, like a lithosphere, atmosphere, magnetosphere, and a heliosphere. So the thermosphere is basically the top layer of the atmosphere. So the typical altitude range is from like 80 kilometers to like 600 or 700 kilometers. The ionosphere is in the altitude range from like 50 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers. So altitudinally, the ionosphere and the thermosphere are not mutually exclusive, exclusive. This is basically because they are defined based on different criteria. So the thermosphere is basically defined from the perspective of the neutral density and the temperature, just like those spheres below that, like a mesosphere, stratosphere, and the troposphere. The ionosphere, on the other hand, is mainly defined from the perspective of plasma dynamics and electrodynamics. So that's mainly classified in terms of like the electron density profile. And then if we take a far away look of the IT, like the one on the right plot, then the terrestrial environment is basically defined by the geomagnetic field, which, as we know, is the so-called magnetosphere, which is formed under the impacts of the solar wind plasma. And from a view at this very far distance, the ionosphere thermosphere is really just a very thin layer. So it can be regarded as the inner boundary of the magnetosphere, right near the foot points of the magnetic field lines. So what are there in the ionosphere thermosphere? I like this plot. I think it really gives a good picture of almost everything in there. Basically, the components in the ionosphere thermosphere can be divided into 2 parts: neutrals and plasma or charged particles. So if you look at the rightmost of this profile, and basically this is a density profile over altitude range from like 90 kilometers to over 1,000 kilometers. So if you look at the rightmost part, you can see the dominant species is essentially the neutral atomic oxygen and the molecular nitrogen, the dinitrogen. And these 2 species makes the dominant contribution to the mass density of the ionosphere thermosphere. But they can also undergo photoionization to generate electrons and all kinds of ions, which will then participate in all the complicated chemical processes. So in the domain of the IT study, the ratio between the oxygen, the neutral oxygen, and the nitrogen is really has been widely used as a proxy to indicate the activity level of the IT dynamics. For example, the recently launched NASA Gold mission have optical measurements of these 2 species, which can be used to derive that integrated O2N2 ratio. To the left of this plot, probably this electron profile is the most important. And for the electron profile, the most prominent feature is that there is a peak in the altitude at the altitude of about 200 to 300 kilometers. So this is basically this peak structure is basically a result of the competition between the energy source and the particle source. So as we know, the electrons are generated as a result of those photoionization. So it needs both the neutrals as a particle source and also the ionization as an energy source. So as the altitude goes up, the neutral density goes down, just like shown on this profile. Although the solar radiance is stronger, so you would expect that at some point there's an optimal point for that ionization rate. So that basically explains that electron profile. Of course, there are also other minor species and neutral, both neutral and charged particles. With such a diverse population, you would expect a lot of interesting stuff would go on in the ionosphere thermosphere. This is another plot. I actually used this in my PhD defense. Although this plot is very busy, but I think it is a very good summary of the dynamic processes in the ionosphere thermosphere. And again, on this plot, all those processes can be basically divided into neutral dynamics and the plasma dynamics, like this white arrows mainly for ions and the yellow for the neutrals. For the neutrals, they mainly undergo different kinds of waves and the circulation, such as gravity waves, tides, and they can and their movement generate the wind in both the horizontal and the vertical directions. And the plasma dynamics seem to be even more complicated, probably due to their interactions with the geomagnetic field. Here we can see the plasmas undergo like a large scale convection from the high latitude and also some localized convection in the middle latitude, and also they can form all kinds of irregular or inhomogeneous structures such as bubbles, plumes, and patches. The ions of the plasma and the neutrals can also interact with each other via collisions, dragging, and so on. So on the other hand, the ionosphere thermosphere is not a closed system, but instead they are driven by the forces from both above and from below. So from above, there are driving from the solar or magnetosphere and those geomagnetic processes. For example, like we mentioned, the solar UV radiation provided the energy sources for the ionization. So with the connection of geomagnetic field lines, the magnetosphere is also providing or driving the IT by providing particle and energy sources. If you were in the CGS workshop of last week, you probably have learned from the talk of Larissa and Nick that nowadays it's getting more and more recognize the importance of the driving from the bottom, the lower atmosphere. For example, the gravity waves, tides, and planetary waves. One example is the so-called southern stratosphere warming, or SSW. Just to emphasize the importance from both ends. With all those interesting stuff and processes, why do we care about the ionosphere thermosphere? I think this question may be answered from two aspects. So firstly, scientifically or physically, the IT is particularly important as part of the atmosphere geospace system. As we just mentioned, it got driven from both above and below, but the IT is not just a recipient. It also can feedback, or in other words, it can also drive the above and the below environments in its own way. For example, with this Phelan current and precipitation from the magnetosphere, the IT got ionized and generated the atmospheric conductance. And this conductance and the current's closure would determine this plasma convection, which will feed back and affect the dynamics in the magnetosphere. So IT is particularly important for the magnetosphere dynamics too. And similarly, you would expect such influence for the of ionosphere thermosphere for the environment below that in the lower atmosphere. But it's also important to care about IT from a practical perspective. As you know, the atmosphere was firstly discovered in an experiment of radio waves, and indeed, the atmosphere plays a critical role in the radio communication nowadays. And with the application of the GPS navigation, the atmosphere can also affect the navigation precision by a lot. After the human entered the space age, we are now having more and more human activities and assets in the IT, in the atmosphere thermosphere. Just 2 days ago, the SpaceX just sent another 4 astronauts to the International Space Station. So right now, those 4 astronauts and 5 more already there, and the ISS, they are right in the atmosphere thermosphere. So we really want to have a good idea about the what's going on in the atmosphere for the sake of those human crew and the ISS. Of course, like those currents in the atmosphere could impact the like oil tubes or cables and the power grids on the ground. So as a brief summary, both scientifically and practically, the atmosphere thermosphere is a very important region that we need to have a good understanding of. So that's pretty much enough of the background. So next, I'd like to talk about the main tool that I'm going to use, the MAGE model. And again, as I said, this is part of that of this CGS project. So as one of the NASA Driver Science Center, the vision of CGS is transforming the understanding and the predictability of space weather. So the PI, Slava Merkin, will be giving 2 AGO talks. I'm listing the abstract number and the time for his talks. So people may want to take down and be there as the AGO starts. And also, this is a website of CGS, and you are welcome to check it out. One of the main tasks of CGS is to develop a multi-scale atmosphere geospace environment model and making use of that model to explore the dynamics in the this whole atmosphere geospace system. This is the blueprint of MAGE, where you can see that basically has included all the critical components in the atmosphere geospace. And the goal of MAGE is not just by putting things together, but instead the aim is to explore the dynamics from a perspective of multiple scale. And essentially, in the case of MAGE, this is what it means we're going to resolve the dynamics from a scale of 2 million kilometers. That's basically the outer boundary of that magnetosphere model to like as small as 20 kilometers. That's particularly somewhere in the auroral ionosphere. So that covers 5 orders of magnitude. And in this study, particularly, we are making use of the core ingredients of MAGE. You may also call it the mini MAGE. So basically, mini MAGE consists of Gamera, which is a global MHD model for the magnetosphere, and the RCN rest convection model. Basically, that's a bounce average, the drift convection of recurrent particles. And this is basically because, as we know, we need to get close to the Earth. Ideal MHD is no longer a good assumption for the plasma there. And mini MAGE also has the TIDCM as a component of the ionosphere thermosphere, which deals with the altitude range from 97 kilometers to 500 to 700 kilometers, depending on the activity level. There is also a remix module. Also, this is basically a hub for these different components to talk about. It itself is also a 2-dimensional electrostatic potential solver. So I'm not talking about too much details about this model because our CGS teammate, Dr. Shanshan Bao from Rice University, has had talked about it in very good details last time in this UNH seminar. But I do want to highlight that in many MAGE, all these components are two-way coupled. For example, the gamma is providing magnetic field and the plasma density for the RCM, which then feed back with a modified pressure and density distribution in the magnetosphere. Another highlight of this mini MAGE model is that we are implementing or integrated precipitation model. So we are making use of the MHD parameters from gamma to derive the so-called monoenergetic electron precipitation, basically by solving the current voltage relation and using this RCM model to provide a diffuse electron precipitation, basically making use of the kinetics solved in RCM. And also, there is a dynamic plasma sphere implemented in the RCM module. Okay, so let's move on to the dynamics during the storm time. So I have personally been focusing on Saps mostly by myself, but I will also cover this Pmap TOI and TAD, TID stuff just as a demonstration of the general capability of the mid-MAGE model of MAGE. Okay. So Saps basically refers to subaurora polarization streams. Essentially refer to the enhanced westward convection, usually on the order of a few kilometers per second in the subaurora region. Is latitudinally very narrow, typically a few degrees. So is a typical mesoscale structure. So the two plots here just to shows you what the Saps look like in the measurements of DMSP satellite, incoherent scattering radar, and the Superton radar. So the prominent feature is that using this precipitation energy spectrum, you can tell where the auroral boundary is, and then to the equator of the auroral boundary, you see the additional or enhanced flow, which is westward. So that's a typical feature of the Saps. It has been often observed in the middle latitude in the subaurora region. So the reason that we care about the Saps is that in the previous studies, it has been found that Saps are closely related to the Saps is representing a type of a boundary between the plasma sheet and the inner magnetosphere. So by studying that dynamics, we are supposed to learn more about the activities in the geospace. So there have been a lot of efforts trying to understand the Saps by doing global simulations. Here I'm just giving three examples using three of the most well-known community models. By the way, this one is what we did last year using a little bit older version called the LTAP. So the mini MAGE is essentially replacing the LFM with the new generation magnetosphere model Gamera, which has a lot of numerical improvements. But like I just mentioned, there are also other important improvements. The key point is that all these models, including our own results, does not really show a very good separation of Saps from the major auroral flow. And as discussed in those papers, this is basically attributed to the lack of sufficient diffuse electron precipitation. that's also the motivation for this study, that we have to implement improve the precipitation model by making use of the diffuse electron precipitation from our RCM model. But again, the Saps structure or the Saps dynamics is a mesoscale one, so that requires really delicate processing for precipitation and conductance. So that's a really challenging problem. And next I'm going to show the progress from the CGS team on resolving the Saps. The previous three plots are all for the well-known St. Patrick's Day storm in 2013. So here we are taking the same event and just have a quicker overview of the solar wind driving conditions. And on this day, there was a CME arriving at the Earth and triggered a geomagnetic storm. So the sudden commencement starts about 6 UT on the day. Okay, so this is what we have got from the MAGE model, and basically this is a comparison with available DMSP measurements during that day. On the left-hand side, we basically have three DMSP satellites available: F16, 17, and F18. And here we are comparing the horizontal ion drifts and the electron precipitation energy flux. So the black curves are the measurements from the DMSP satellites, and this the green, the light blue, and this purple are the simulation results sampled along the DMSP trajectories. So at this moment, 11:57 UT, indicated by the vertical red dashed line, the three satellites were just located at these 3 points as shown by the three arrows. So the point is that, as you can see, for example, in this virtual F18, we can see a very clear Saps structure to the equator of this auroral boundary. So again, the energy flux is to show you where the auroral boundary is. Just like what was captured by the real DMSP satellites. It was less obvious in the F17, probably because the MRT was a little bit earlier. And then on the right-hand side, you can basically see a global view of those. So firstly, the auroral energy flux and the westward ion drift and the Phelan current. So from the energy flux, you can basically tell the auroral boundary is right below 60 degrees latitude, maybe 58 or so. And then compared to the westward ion drift, you can see this additional flow channel from 18 MLT to around 22 MLT at this maybe 56 or so magnetic latitude, so right below the auroral boundary. And it's clearly discernible from the major auroral convection. Another point from this plot is that, as you see, all these three satellites were crossing from the dusk side toward the dawn side. So if you look at this auroral precipitation, you can see basically a stronger precipitation energy flux when the satellites were crossing the dawn side aurora. This is basically because the diffuse electron precipitation, diffuse electron precipitation has that downward shift. So there is a preference of the electron precipitation energy flux. So again, this shows the advantage of using the RCM kinetics to characterize the diffuse electron precipitation. So next I'm going to illustrate the driving mechanisms of the Saps. So again, so firstly, we need to determine the auroral boundary. Here, I'm using this purple contour standing for 1 milliwatts per square meter to indicate where the auroral boundary is. And this boundary will be overplotted in other panels. And in the panel B, we are showing the Phelan current density. Here you can see the clear typical region 1 and the region 2 sense Freeland current pattern. Again, I'm using 0.2 microampere per square meter as a threshold to find the Freeland current boundary. And in panel C, we just show the westward ion drift, and by plotting the boundaries all together, you can see right between this low latitude boundary of Freeland current and the low latitude boundary of the auroral precipitation, there is the enhanced westward ion drift flow channel. That's what we have identified as Saps from this global view. So the auroral boundary is also plotted on top of the Peterson conductance, and you can see that basically is consistent with the conductance boundary. So basically below this auroral boundary, there's hardly conductance, but as you can see from the Freeland current boundary, there's still substantial Freeland current that needs to be closed. So as a result, there is a strong poleward E field has to be generated for that, which drives the Saps. And that poleward E field, as we're shown here, is also clearly has that kind of separate channel. We can further trace the source of this gap between the low latitude boundary of the Freeland current and the auroral precipitation. Excuse me. So what we did is by mapping the boundaries along magnetic field lines to the equatorial magnetosphere plane. So in the bottom right panel, sorry for a little bit messy, but we are just trying to provide the necessary information. I hope you can see this light blue contour, like a sound shape. This is basically the dusk side region 2 Freeland current boundary mapped to the equatorial plane. And also this purple contour is this auroral boundary mapping to the magnetosphere. So as you can see, the Freeland current boundary is more inward compared to the auroral precipitation boundary. So this is basically because the Freeland current is mostly contributed by the plasma pressure with dominant contribution from the ions, while the precipitation here is mainly uniquely for the electrons. And as we know, the ions have a higher energy than electrons, so they can penetrate deeper than the electrons. That's why there is a gap between these two boundaries, and which map to the ionosphere, resulting in the Freeland current boundary at a lower latitude. And right in this gap, there is that enhanced E field to drive the Saps. So this is basically an illustration of the driving mechanism of the Saps due to different penetration for recurrent ions and electrons. And also on this plot, we showed the TC from the IT model plus the ion drift. So what's shown here is that you can see between these two boundaries or inside the Saps region, there is the trough of that TC, which we'll talk about more later. And you can check out my AGO talk with more details. This is just one conceptual plot I tried to make. I'm not sure if this is clear enough for you, but again, this is showing the pressure in the magnetosphere equatorial plane, and this light blue or cyan curve is for Freeland current, which maps along field lines to, here I'm just plotting to 2RE to avoid covering that Saps in the atmosphere. And that purple is for the precipitation boundary, inner boundary, and you would expect more that beyond that. So basically, this is just to trying to give you a three-dimensional view of the mapping of the magnetosphere boundaries in the equatorial, in the ionosphere. So that's more about the driving mechanisms of Saps. So we may want to move a little forward to learn what are the effects of Saps. So one of the well-known effects of Saps is that the Saps electric field can generate the plasmospheric plume and the storm enhanced density plume. So here I'm showing the plasma density in the equatorial plane and in the ionosphere, and the TC in the ionosphere. And here on the left, you can see the how the plume is formed in the dusk sector as a result of those E field, Saps E field. So our CGS teammate Shanshan Bao has been working on the relation between the plasmaspheric plume and the SED plume, and she is giving a AGO talk on December the 15th. So you're welcome to check out more details in her talk. So as we follow the plasma flow in Saps, now we are in the day side and right about to enter the polar cap. So let's just take a pause because there is an important process here in the day side aurora, namely the poleward moving auroral forms, or also known as Pmaps. So Pmaps is regarded as a fundamental characteristic of the day side aurora. They are moving poleward, just how the name came from, and drifted into the polar cap. So it is important because it has been learned that the Pmaps can create isolated polar cap patches, which is another topic that I will cover a little later, and also generate the atmospheric irregularities. And those irregular or inhomogeneous structures are particularly important because they can disturb the radio communication in the polar region. And another significance is that it's generally believed the Pmaps are related to, are interpreted as atmospheric signatures of the so-called FTE, flux transfer events, from the magnetopause reconnection. So here I'm trying to show how Pmaps looks like in our MAGE simulation. Again, this is for the same event simulation of 2013. So on the left-hand side, I'm showing the aurora energy flux. As you can see, the forms are moving poleward from day side and across, enter those again under the polar cap. The right-hand side is just a field current, where you can also see that poleward moving forms. And basically, these Pmaps are repetitive, and we can see that structures in both the aurora energy flux and the field line currents. I'll just wait for the animation to finish. Here I have to saturate the color bar a little bit because the day side aurora is generally weaker compared to the night side, so that we can see a more outstanding Pmap signatures. Here is a little more analysis of the Pmaps. So basically, we just sampled the field line current and the aurora electron precipitation energy flux along the noon midnight meridian, as shown by this black curve. And then we look at how it evolves over time. And the vertical axis is magnetic latitude, and from day side to night side. And yeah, sorry, this is a little bit different from what people typically use in the literature, where they want to put the pole in the top and day side in the bottom. But still, you can clearly see that poleward moving forms and that are passed manner when these Pmaps occur. And the slope of these strips basically represents the phase speed of the Pmaps. And we can calculate that phase speed and comparing it with the background convection velocity. So the Pmap phase speed is basically consistent with the convection, implying that they are co-moving with the background plasma. So like I mentioned before, the Pmaps are suggested to be related to the FTEs from the magnetopause reconnection, which we will look into in more details later, but not in this talk though. So now finally we are entering the polar cap, and here one of the most well-known features is the so-called tunnel of ionization of the polar cap patches. So basically, TOI is a channel of high density averaging plasma. They got transported from the day side mid latitude into the into the cusp and the polar cap due to this enhanced convection E field. Of course, we also need plenty of plasma reservoir in the middle latitude. And the polar cap, the TOIs can got broken and form the patches which can drift around as together with those plasma convection. Again, these patches structures are regarded as the main sources of the disturbance in the polar region navigation communication signals. That's why we need to get a good idea, a good knowledge of them. So again, this is to show how the TOIs and the PC patches are formed in our simulation. And here you can see as convection is enhanced, more plasma from the mid-latitude got entrained in the polar cap. And you also see the MF variation resulted in that disturbance, very large disturbance in the convection pattern, which is making the TOI undulating and finally breaking into small patches, and those patches can drift around another one as the tongue gets to the night side. And you can also see similar, well, not similar, but related structures in the freeline currents. There are definitely a lot more to be discovered from the processes that has been reproduced with our model. Here I'm just showing the animation as a first step. So now that we have taken enough look at the mesoscale structures in the thermosphere, so next, if we take a little bit of far away view and trying to look at the IT on a global perspective, then the traveling atmospheric and atmospheric disturbances, or TID and TADs, are probably interesting topics. So TADs and the TIDs, they are just another type of most commonly observed atmospheric, thermospheric storm effects. Here I'm giving one example of a TID observation where you can see those ripples coming out from the aurora region and propagating to the low latitude. On the right hand side, this is a movie made by another CGS teammate, also my HAL colleague, Dr. Kevin Fine. So this is result of TAD from the MAGE simulation and the comparison with two satellite observations, the Champ and Grace. And there should be another one, which I don't have here. It's just by comparing this MAGE simulation with the standalone TIDCM driven by empirical Weimar model, you can see a lot of improvements in this data model comparison, which on one hand demonstrate the importance of a dynamic magnetospheric driving in the study of dynamic processes like a TAD or TIDs. And Kevin is having an AGO talk on December 9th. That's an invited talk. And the previous one by Slava is also invited. Oh, I think I should have mentioned that. Let's just wait for the video to finish. And here you can see the TIDs propagate, and they can even propagate to the other hemisphere. So this is the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. Notice the color bar is flexible just to best show that wave fronts. And by the way, Kevin is giving a colloquium at HAL in about 14 minutes. So I think I really have to speed up a little bit so that people won't miss that. But this is the last slide before my summary and conclusion, and we are almost there. Okay, so also, well, sorry, I have one more. This is a TID from Minimate results. I hope you don't mind I show you this animation again, but this time I'd like you to pay attention to this ripples that are coming out of the aurora region. and all covering, okay, that again, covering a wide MLT range. So those are typical TID signature, large scale TID signatures. Okay, since the background TC is really strong, so sometimes the TID signatures is not as substantial, it's not as obvious. So that's why I have another plot to better visualize that. So again, I was doing a similar sampling along the noon midnight meridian. Like here, again, the top is a midnight, mid-noon, and the bottom is a midnight. And here you can see that very clear TID propagation from the lower latitude to the lower latitude, both in the day side and in the night side. And this slope just means it's propagating down to the equator world. And also you see this kind of structures, which means there are structure propagating from the other hemisphere. So we are going to work on more analysis of this TID stuff with our MAGE model. So finally, it's a conclusion page. I will just leave it here. And but the key point is that with the MAGE model, we have explored the typical several typical mesoscale atmosphere thermospheric dynamics, including Saps, Pmaps, TOI, polar patch, and also those medium scale, large scale TIDs. And the simulation results are very good, and we are going to work on more analysis. And I just want to emphasize that it's critically important in the study of IT dynamics that we need to treat them as part of a coupled geospace system. So I think that's all of my talk. Thank you very much. I'm taking questions.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Please unmute yourself if you have questions for Don. And so. So,
Don,
yeah, go ahead.
This is Slava. Don, in your, I think the slide -1 or -2, where you were showing TIDs, yeah, -1, yeah, this one. No, the previous one, the movie. Could you talk a little bit about how these TIDs get generated in this particular movie? Is there a pulsating energy deposition at high latitudes, or what makes these waves go?
Well, so first of all, I'm not really an expert, but I just started learning about the TIDs. So my understanding is that as the storm started, there are enhanced geoheating in that aurora zone, which provides the energy source for the TIDs to be triggered. But I'd like any expert from the audience to correct me or add more comments to that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I ask one very general question? This is, I mean, you showed a number of cases where you're showing predictions, the simulation alongside the measurements, and from a non-space scientist point of view, I'm just asking: is there sort of like a standard thing you would like to be able to forecast that you also measure? Is there one? I see the complexity of the fields, but is there one scalar value, one measurement you would most like to be able to predict or test your predictions on?
Well, thank you for that question, but I think that's really a very good question, because the whole center has been doing the discussion about the sense metrics, like well, it may be equivalent to your question, like when can you say this model is perfect, or when can you say the model is doing well? I think in terms of the measurements, it's basically limited by the like a hardware or the capacity to launch to do all those measurements. So usually like we are using like a satellite orbiting, which can only give the one line sampling, and are also limited by that orbit period. But modeling, on the other hand, is providing a global picture of that. I think what's really going on is that we are trying to getting these two aspects as close as possible.
So I think I understand that, and that there's similar challenges in meteorology or in oceanography. So my interest is really in how do I tell if I want to know if it's doing well, but how do I tell if the model is doing better? So how do I actually improve parameters and parameterizations? So maybe sometime we could talk more about that.
Sure, yeah. But I think I can try to provide a little more answers. I think at least with some certain aspect of the physics that we can try to resolve. For example, in the energy flux of electron precipitation, and we know that the electrons would undergo that downward drift. So we're supposed to see a downward preference of energy flux over the dusk side, which is missing if we don't have kinetics involved when characterizing the precipitation. So in that regard, we can claim that this MAGE model is having a bigger improvement compared to the previous LTR, for example, which didn't take that drift physics into consideration.
That makes sense. Thank you. I just to put in one more. So we've done work to say, what part of the physics do I really need to improve first, rather than thinking about what it was that various people worked on their PhD theses. So for like the Navy's operational model, we could actually tell that they had a moist convection scheme of all the different things in the physics that they could improve. We could tell before they did it that improving this would actually help the dynamics of the model most. And I'd be very interested to know if we could do that with you guys.
Well, so I think the whole center is definitely welcoming all kinds of collaboration. So yeah, probably we can talk more after this talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Anybody else? So don't just go back to this one, the plot you have, the movie, the last movie. Go to them. There are two lines, one in magenta, another one. So could you explain what they are means and where is Saps channel, how it evolved?
Oh yeah, thank you for that. So here I'm just.
We may stop a little bit to explain in detail.
Yes.
Yeah.
So so here, so this plot basically is the color bar shows the TC, and these green arrows are for the ion convection velocity, and this scale length for 1.5 kilometers per second. The purple curve is the precipitation boundary, like we mentioned in the Saps session. So basically, like here, you can expect this is a low latitude boundary of the auroral precipitation. And this cyan or light blue, that's for field line current boundary, but basically it's for the downward field line current. So again, like in this dusk side, you can see the region 2 field line current boundary, which is lower than the auroral boundary. And right in between these two boundaries, that's what where the enhanced poleward E field is generated, so that it drives the Saps channel, which you can also tell from these green arrows, there is this enhanced flow here. So this enhanced flow is transporting the plasma and or especially that low latitude part of that Saps. That's like a typical scenario for the generation of the so-called SED plumes, which basically that tip structure of this mid-lattice plasma that got into the cusp and the polar cap. So yeah, this is about the format of this plots, and which is showing a clear picture of that Saps effects and also this plasma transport from mid-latitude to polar cap. So not TID.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else has any questions? Yeah.
So I actually have a question, comment, and a question, and maybe then a comment. For your Pmap simulation in particular, when you were showing the energy flux, I think it's that last one, you just go back previous slide. Yeah. So the top panel is the energy flux of the precipitation. And the question is that, are you using the mono diffuse population there, or a broadband direct entry precipitation in that diagnostic?
Oh, this is the precipitation model in this run is basically mono diffuse. But if you look at those formats, I think this should be just the monoenergetic. We don't have RCM precision at this high latitudes.
Okay, thank you, Don, and we probably to move to another seminar. So thank you, and thank you for attending this talk. And that's all.
Yeah, thank you all. And just show this is my email. Anyone,
Yeah.
if you got a question, please feel free to contact me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.